My name is Bobby Andor, and I was assigned Chapter 17, Adult Basic Education. As you are looking at these images, you notice that most of them might not necessarily have to pertain with adult basic education programs specifically. However, I feel that these images reveal to us the student, which is the most important part of education because we are actually teaching students, not just applying theories that we learned in the classroom. So I just wanted to preface this segment of my paper, the visual aspect, with this introduction. My paper focused on adult basic education and its students. The most important thing I think to realize about adult basic education is that it's mainly designed for people over the age of compulsory schooling who want to reach desired levels of literacy and numeracy. So this means that these are programs designed for adults to meet the standards of K through 12 education. There are two important things that I feel that have been shown by my paper and this chapter is that adult basic education, or ABE, is not highly standardized, regulated, but it is highly contextualized, so it's highly individualized depending on the program that you are looking at. ABE has multiple formats, instructors, settings, theories on teaching material. The students are of multiple ages and of experience levels. Most students are forced to leave school and only return when time permits in their lifestyles. The instructors are similar, they're just as diverse, which makes it difficult to create support and professional development for educators in ABE programs. There's also a great deal of pull between traditional versus progressive methods of teaching. And then there's different settings for the program as well. There's three types of settings for ABE programs. First, there's the traditional setting. When one thinks of a traditional setting, a general education development program, or a GED, is what comes to mind, where the focus is actually achieving that level of education or literacy or numeracy. Compulsory is the second, and it's geared towards life skills and is usually accountable to several bodies because of the funding. And then there's the last type of setting, which is responsive. Responsive is meant to meet personal, individual goals, and is usually community-based. Often it's in a community building or a community space and funded by the community. And there's also different theories on how material should be taught. There's the skill-based theory. It's more along the lines of traditional process of learning. It's very measurable and defined, and it also believes that the information provided is portable, meaning if a student can learn how to read information in the textbooks in the classroom, that they can go out and read any textbook in any situation and be able to understand. The ideological approach means that skills have meaning and applications beyond the classroom, similar to the liberatory approach, where numeracy and literacy are politically. So basically these learning theories are very much based on engaging in the culture in which the person is learning. The last theory is social practices, and that basically deals with that students don't necessarily need to learn in a linear fashion, meaning they don't have to go through K through 12 education in every year through every lesson, but that they really do just need support in specific areas. Maybe someone's really great at math, but they don't read very well, so that they need support basically in reading, and that if they're doing well at the other levels, that you don't necessarily need to teach that. It's more of a learner based approach. All these elements have a lot of differences between them. It causes a lot of strife within the field because there's so many different things out there, and there's not one way of teaching that's going to work for every type of diverse student that you meet. So there's a lot of pushing and pulling in the ABE field. Another important element of ABE is policies that affect the programs. One of the biggest probably reforms was the 1996 reform of welfare that forced people on welfare to go and seek additional education so they could become part of the workforce. And that later turned pretty much into the Workforce Investment Act of 1998, which completely changed everything into workforce development, which was a big change because before everything was developed on the premise that human potential development instead of human capital development, seeing people as something to invest in, capital that's going to lead down the line to even more capital. So having these programs, having these policy changes have made there more clarity in ABE programs, but now they lack responsiveness because now there's more red tape, so we can't change everything for one specific adult learner in a classroom. The rest of the chapter is pretty much devoted to learning about international ABE programs. For example, there's one in Scotland. That one was basically developed because half of the population had low levels of literacy. Along with that, it was a very social-based curriculum, meaning that the students picked where they wanted to study and then they started from there. It's been fairly successful, but probably the most successful has been in China, where they created a primary education program for women and ethnic minorities with a really unique approach of prevent first, eradicate second, and upgrade third. But this program also had its own problems. One of the big problems was that as people wanted to leave the country and find better employment in the city, they were often undereducated, and if they were undereducated, they had trouble finding work in the city, so they usually ended up in a worse position than they would have if they had stayed in the country. The last example is in Africa, where it's more of a traditional school-like teacher-focused program that uses the colonialization language, so not the indigenous, which is, I felt was really shocking because you would think that most people would be more geared to experiential learning, but I guess in that culture it really doesn't seem like it fits in there, so they kind of have gone back to more of a traditional route. Another thing that has affected education in ABE programs is immigration. There's more than 1 million people in immigration that are immigrants to this country or seeking naturalization status. This adds quite a diverse background because it's not just necessarily Mexican American immigrants, it's immigrants from all over the world. So between that, educators lacking training to meet the diverse needs of the students, and teachers leaving the field, it's made it difficult to make changes in the system. The last part of my paper focused on a study which looked at domestic trauma in adult education. Basically, this study went through and asked students along the El Paso border about domestic abuse they experience. 1/3 of women experience some sort of domestic abuse in their lives, and then they were asked to report what happened in that abusive situation. The study basically resulted in showing that an ABE program can either be the cause of the abuse, continue, or increase existing abuse in students, which can lead students, specifically women, because the study focused on women, to drop out of ABE programs. So it's showing that there is a definite need for intervention that would help increase retention rates in ABE programs. The reason that I've been showing you these images is because I've actually worked with an ABE program that I had designed myself. It was for high school age students, but it was a college preparatory course where they made their own artwork and they were trained in the different art practices that they would need to know for college level. So a lot of digital artwork, which their school didn't really provide. After working with these students and dealing with the stigma that comes with being and living or being an immigrant to the United States, most people just turn up their noses at these students and think that they're not human. And from that experience, it really showed me the importance of the human factor in education, that we need to understand where our students coming from to better help them meet their goals in education. So I thought, what a better way to show a human side to an ABE program than by showing someone's most personal object. Well, for an artist at least, that's their artwork. So that's why I've been showing you this artwork. To me, both of these chapters felt incomplete in their research, because the chapter in the book basically just gave the traditional definition, all the elements that are incorporated into an ABE program. Okay, but and then they left out the students. They even included examples, international examples of programs, but they forgot the students. So that's why I brought up this research, because it included more of the students and a barrier that affects many students that we would possibly see in a classroom. The only problem with that research with the domestic trauma was that it didn't give any tools for educators to solve those problems in their classroom. So I feel between the two of these articles, it really shows that there's a lack of adequate research and funding to really make ABE programs successful and meet those needs. Like in China, you know, they have a completely different way of thinking about adult education, and it seems to have really worked because they have so many people and they've reached so many, yet we don't seem to be meeting that need. So maybe it's not just about doing research, but making solutions that actually work in a classroom. And I felt if we could do that, that maybe our adult education, basic education programs would be more successful, and we could deal with a lot more problems than what we're currently dealing with now. So thank you so much for your time.